Hello and welcome to So Shoot Me TV with me, Pete Dance. My guest today is an actor, writer and producer. He is massively talented and he makes everything look easy even when it's not. Before we meet him, let's have a little look at him in action.
Oh, this? Don't worry about it. Yeah, I know those guys. It's not a big deal. It's definitely not what you think it is. Unless you're thinking it's a fully grown man sitting under a table trying to hide from his school friends, in which case, it's exactly what this is.
Now I have traveled long. Believe me, I have traveled far. I am mighty happy to be with you all here tonight.
You're trying to be shut in your life.
Let's go now.
I'm sure he's here to avenge himself upon his faithless wife. He's here!
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elliot Cable. Elliot, so pleased you could come and talk to us today. I know how busy you are.
Try my best.
What's the current project you're working on?
I'm doing later this week. I'm shooting a World War II film called A Shamrock at My Side, and I get to play quite a kind of cheeky soldier type in that, so that's fun. So I've been doing that for the last couple of months, on and off.
And what was the Isle of?
The Isle Tide Hotel.
That's the one.
Yeah, that was. We wrapped on that a few weeks ago. Actually, that was. Well, that is rather. It's an interactive feature film game. So I don't know if you remember Bandersnatch that was on Netflix, where it was one of those ones where you get the choice prompt at certain points during the film, and you can choose which path the film goes down.
Yeah.
So basically, they're a really. It's a very complex version of that. And essentially, it's about a guy who kind of gets invited to this mysterious hotel, and he has to find his daughter. And basically, it's kind of put into this engine that creates. I think I was talking to the guy who creates them, and I think he said it's something like 20,000 choice points go into this this engine to create kind of an interactive game more than it is a film.
Almost, my brain would blow up. It's hard enough shooting a film where you're shooting in order, not shoot in order, and then not necessarily.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was. To be honest, the director, Harry Chadwick, the director, the way he kind of just had the story in his brain, and the way you could ask him anything, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's this," and it was the way because he wrote it as well, and so he just has this whole, the script, because of all the threads that you can go through and all the choices you can make. It was a 250-page script. And so it was, but he had it all in there, and he was just, at any one point, he would know exactly what direction we're going in. It was without him being like that, I think it would have been much more difficult than it was.
So let's go back, back in time now, time travel back to Elliot growing up. I mean, where were you born?
I was born in London, but when I was about 6, like around the Barbican kind of way, so fairly central. And then we moved down to Brighton, and I spent the rest of the time growing up in Brighton, rolling around, being a rowdy teenager there. So it was, I grew up in Brighton, and it was cool, man. It was good fun.
When you were at school, were you one of the cool kids, or were you?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. It's one of those things where it.
You don't have to say you are if you are. Don't feel embarrassed.
I'm fighting the urge. I was really cool, man. I was really cool, Pete. I was like, no, I was one of those things where we had a really big group of friends, which made us look popular. They made us look cool.
Right.
But I think when you're that age, it's friends of convenience more than anything. You all kind of band together because it's better to all be in a massive group than it is to be on your own.
Yeah.
So a lot of those people I don't speak to anymore. But when I was at school, we were you're like a little family, and it's So I don't know. It's hard to say, especially as you get older and kind of groups start to merge and people start to care less about stuff.
Yeah.
But I think we certainly at the time thought we were the cool group. I think we were just a big group that occupied a lot of space. So
Yeah, I guess so. I guess you probably at the time you thought, if I'd asked you the question when you were 15, 16, are you cool?
I wouldn't have hesitated.
You'd have gone, yeah, of course I am.
Yeah, no doubt.
Now you look back and go, probably I wasn't.
Not so much.
Maybe it was. Hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
No,
but at the time it does.
It does.
At the time, it's the be all and end all.
Yeah.
And like I remember, I was thinking about it as well when when like we would have obviously this massive group that would kind of all knock about together, and you'd have like the place where you'd go at lunchtime. And I remember the odd few times while I was at secondary school of not being able to find my big group of mates. Maybe in hindsight they were hiding from me. Maybe I wasn't cool. But I remember at the time being like, oh my God, I've got to spend a break time on my own. This is the end of days. Can't let anyone see me and break time on my own. But in hindsight, it just doesn't matter. It's just not, it's not a big deal. But obviously when you're that young, you think it's everything.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what about sports? At school, were you good at sports? I've seen you play a bit of football.
Yeah. In Norway, that was all me and Luca did. A bit of acting and then just football for most of the time. Yeah. When I was a kid, my parents and my brother will attest this, and they will also hold it against me until the day I die. I was so horrifically competitive, like in everything, video games, sport, everything. And it was horrible. Like I would proper temper tantrums if I didn't win, kind of thing. And but as I got older, I kind of remained competitive, but kind of attained the ability to just go, oh, it's just a game. Like if I'm playing competitively, then yeah. But actually, when we're playing football at school, it's just a game. And actually, that meant that I played recreationally. I played a lot of sports with my friends, but when it came to teams, I just couldn't be asked because you'd have all these like. I almost had a bit in the same sense of what I was saying, like being cool was like such a big thing. I actually kind of had like the opposite of that when it came to sport because I was kind of like. Look at us, like 13-year-olds taking this shit so seriously. Like, why are we? It's just a game of football on a school field. Like, relax. So that kind of stopped me from doing competitive sport. But nonetheless, I tried a number of teams. I tried football. People took it too seriously. I tried rugby, and I was scared of getting hit. So
So what? Were there any lessons that you particularly liked, or teachers that you particularly liked?
I love drama. Drama was like my big one. But I also really. Especially when I got to kind of year 10, year 11, sort of 15 years old, I really got on with like maths and English because I understood them and I got on really well with them. I actually really enjoyed it. Psychology, I really enjoyed psychology. I can thank my brother for that because he took it, because obviously he's older, he took psychology as an option first. Yeah. I was like, oh, it looks really interesting. And so I did and absolutely loved it. Teachers, shout out to Mr. Talliard.
Mr. Talliard,
my drama teacher.
Good, yeah.
Where it all started. So he was great. He was amazing. And he was just like this kind of real oddball guy who just made us do weird things. And I just loved it. It was so much fun. And I'd done like some really low key kind of drama lessons and like stagecoach and things like that prior to going to secondary school. But secondary school was the first place where I'd seen like a black box studio and costumes and props and scripts and really kind of digging into that kind of stuff and so I really loved that. Really enjoyed psychology. I found that really interesting. Shout out Mr. Owen. Mr. Owen was a legend. He used to just come out with some really weird anecdotes, and so I enjoyed school actually. I kind of hear a lot of people saying they didn't enjoy school, but I actually had a really good time.
I was going to say, were you naughty or were you one of the good guys in
I was one of the good guys, but I had my phase, and I remember in year 8 I hadn't had a detention, and so I told all my mates. My mate was like, "I'm going to get you a detention." So obviously we mucked about, got a detention, and I never got one after that because I hated it. It was so boring, but it became this like Medal of Honor to have a detention. I tell you what, I had pretty much the exact same parents' evening the entire time I was at school. It was that. He's good, he's smart, he's doing well, but he talks way too much and he distracts other people. And he can talk and distract people but still do very well with his work, but the people he's talking to can't, so he needs to stop. And I didn't. So every year was exactly the same. It was he's doing well, but just stop talking. So, and I never did.
Yeah, that's
I
brilliant.
never did. And up until this day.
Absolutely. Well, this is why you're here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is why
Just
I picked
talk.
on you.
Yeah, exactly. But weirdly, I don't enjoy going back now.
Don't you?
No, it's weird. I'm kind of. It's one of those things where like I had such a great time growing up. I spent about 15 years there, so there was such an intense, and all through my teen years, it was such an intense period in your life where so much happens. Everything's very dramatic, and so when you go back, it's all just like Vietnam flashbacks and awkward teen memories and stuff. But actually, the friends that I still have from Brighton aren't in Brighton anymore. So yeah, so I actually I don't find myself down there that often.
So your parents still there?
They are, yeah, they are.
And so there was you and your brother.
Yes, yeah,
Is
Josh.
he younger than you or
Older. I think he just turned 30 this year. So he's old as the hills now that he's hit 30. Often, I think.
Is he interested in acting, or is he
Literally not at all. He's the complete opposite. He, at least especially when we were growing up, was very introverted, and I was always the one just being an absolute idiot and making a scene and being like a real attention seeker, which worked for him because he hated attention. So it was a good double act. But he actually now he's a lecturer at Essex University, so he does have to do some public speaking, which again, knowing him as a child was the last thing I thought he'd go into. So he's a psychology lecturer and he does therapy on the side. So he's oh my god, yeah, he's just a great person all round, and I'm just like the narcissist of the family, trying to just sort of see myself on camera more.
Right. You and him get on great.
We do, yeah.
The way you speak about him,
yeah,
like a nasty taste in your mouth.
Not in the slightest. Not in the slightest.
You get on great.
Yeah, we do.
It's sort of yin and yang, isn't it? Really, if he's introvert and you're extrovert.
Yeah, I think so.
Let you have the
limelight.
Yeah.
Yeah, well and truly. Yeah, so he actually got married recently, and I was the best man at his wedding, which was because I got to do a speech, and yeah. So it was wicked. So we get on really well, actually. Yeah, it's the speech is actually quite funny, but not because I'm funny, because there's like points of me kind of cracking jokes and little stories and things mixed in with me trying not to cry. So it was one of those things where like it was such a beautiful day, and from the minute like the ceremony started, I was like on the verge of crying the whole time. Right. I'm not a big crier, but I was like, my chin was going and the lip was wobbling. And I was like, oh really?
It's
honestly,
horrible when that happens.
And then my dad cried, and I've only seen my dad cry maybe like once or twice in 27 years.
Yeah.
And so when he went, I was a goner. And I barely got it together enough to do this speech over dinner.
So you're coming up to we've moved through school and through your teenage years, and we're coming up to kind of leaving school now and making choices after that.
Yeah.
So I suppose really the question is how did acting sort of start to appear in your mind more as I'm going down that road?
It didn't until I was much older. It was always one of those things where I kind of just because I didn't know anyone who took acting seriously. For example, there's people that I've met since who went to Brit school or had friends who went to Brit school, had parents involved in the industry, or relatives and friends or whatever. I didn't know anyone in the industry when I was a kid, and so I didn't know anyone who had done it. So I was like, so you don't just do it. You can have it as a hobby, but you don't just do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it. I say that's kind of how it started. It's kind of how it didn't start, because I kind of just went through like secondary school and college just doing like plays, just doing like the school plays, which is the video I sent you of me doing DNA, which was the first recorded performance I think I ever did.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I've watched it. I didn't watch it all, not because I was unhappy with the acting. I was completely happy with everything. There was a person close to the camera who had a most awful laugh and laughed all the way.
I know exactly what that is.
At the end, I went, I can't listen to this anymore.
I know exactly what it is. That was not a member of the audience laughing. That was one of the characters crying. So that was, and I remember this so well, because I remember someone telling me about it after the show. And
this person going, There's crying on it.
Yeah, that was my mate Nathan, who I remember really clearly. His
Hang
character
on,
was,
what's
for the
his-
first 10, 15 minutes of the play, he was just sat on the floor crying. But in the way that it's filmed, you can't see him.
No.
So you can just hear, like, quite consistently for the first 10 minutes, this go. It's like, oh God. We were just a bunch of 16-year-olds doing a play. Actually, we got into the local paper, which is my first claim to fame.
Yeah.
And it was cool. And that was basically how I kind of navigated, satiating the need to act. Was kind of, I had my studies and then I just kind of did it on the side as and when I could.
Yeah.
And that was right the way through up until I actually went to drama school. I didn't go to drama school until after I went to university. So I went to university and studied history. I had a great time. I loved it. It was really good. I genuinely enjoyed the course. It was very interesting. I did a great dissertation that I enjoyed writing, and it was while I was there that the university I went to had a filmmaking society where you could basically go and hire equipment. You could hire cameras and mics, and you could just go and make a film, and then a couple of times a year they'd screen them. And so I got really stuck into that like as soon as I got to uni, because again I was kind of like, the way this is going to be a part of my life is it's a hobby, it's a side hustle
Yeah.
alongside what I will do, which will be some corporate office job or something.
I remember you talking to me once about how it was difficult telling your parents that you wanted to go into acting because
Yeah.
not for the audience purpose. You're not from your family isn't from an entertainment area
Yeah,
at
no.
all. So, and I imagine that people watching this, there'll be some people who also have parents that go, "Oh, you need a trade.
Yeah.
What are you doing?"
Yeah.
So, just tell us a bit about how that came about and where their reaction and
Yeah.
how you
I
dealt with it.
Yeah, so I don't have any kind of creatives in the family really. But I was always, because I was always the attention seeker and I was always doing something to, embarrass myself. I think they always kind of knew that acting was something that I wanted to do. And I think when I was 18, I think I mentioned drama school once, and my mum was like, "Nah, we'll just you don't need that." I think the main thing for them was just have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And so actually, when it came to me being like, "Oh, I'm going to do the drama school thing, and I'm going to try and do that," I think they weren't that shocked, I don't think, but I also think they were kind of happy for me to do it because I had, in their eyes, something to fall back on. If this all falls through, he's got a degree, so he can go and get an office job. Like, it's, you know what I mean? It was, I kind of ticked the box to then kind of,
Right.
free myself from those shackles to then go, hey, I'm going to go left and I'm going to do the acting thing. So actually, they've been really great. They've been very, very supportive. And they keep telling me I'm going to get my big break soon, which is a nice sentiment.
So that we don't go marching off too quickly,
Yes.
let's go back to Inside Cleopatra.
Yeah. Inside Cleopatra was the very first screen thing that I ever did. It's on YouTube. It was screened at the university, and it was kind of about a university student going to university and doing drama and trying to sleep with all of his classmates, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what that was about.
So we already mentioned, and we should mention here while we're actually talking about it, is the in episode 1. I guess there must be sex scenes in all of the episodes or most of the episodes, because that's the idea of the plot. Did you find it difficult? Do you find the sex scenes in films difficult?
Yeah. Actually, there's been a really good kind of movement in the industry now of getting intimacy coordinators for sex scenes. So when you watch something like Game of Thrones or Normal People, there's intimacy coordinators. So in the same way that you would choreograph a dance or a fight, you choreograph a sex scene.
Yeah.
When you're a student in 2014, you don't have that. And so for the first one in the first episode is probably one of the more graphic ones. But I say, the student films I did subsequently throughout those 3 years, there was other films that I had sex scenes in, and generally it was the same kind of practice where you and the person you were doing the scene with were kind of left in the room, and you kind of just go, work it out for yourselves. Which now it's a really unsafe way of doing it, because now it's all about, you know, communication and finding out what you're comfortable with. Where do you want to be touched? Where do you not want to be touched? And basically, again, choreographing the sex scene to the point where you know the steps, you know where you're going to end up, you know where you're moving to, you know who you're kissing, who you're touching, and that allows you to detach your brain from that and be the character on top of the sex scene. Whereas when I was doing it, it became, you know, because the directors would be like, listen, we have to get from here to there, so you guys just work out how you want to do it. It became like, oh, okay, well, you know, it's a really self-conscious thing of like, okay, well, you know, how does Elliot have sex, and so how do I just, I'll just go and do that. And so it's not a character anymore. It's actually, and that's why it's unsafe. And I generally would always check in with the person, just be like, hey, was that cool? But there wasn't enough of that. So those sex scenes were awkward, man, and they were difficult. And luckily, the actresses that I did them with were quite relaxed, kind of quite cool, and so we had some rapport going into it. So it was like, it was all on the basis of like, hey, let's just be calm and relaxed about this, and let's just find our way through it. We'll do it as many times as we need to, or as few times as we want to, and just get through it. So no, there was nothing too contentious about it. But it was weird, especially being the first thing that I'd ever done on screen. Going and doing that, you know, day one, I was like, oh.
I should say so. I watched it and thought, wow, they both did a great job there.
Yeah, it was deep end. It really was deep end.
Really, really well done.
Thank you.
And it looked, I was going to say, looked professional. But it, you know, it looked natural.
Yeah,
relatively speaking, as natural as I've seen most sex scenes, and they are difficult.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the talking about sex. I didn't mean to just jump in.
Put that behind us now. We're done with the sex. The sex segment of the interview is over.
Cover that, because you know, it is something you have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, they're interesting. Since leaving university, it's like when I was at uni, it was like there was almost like a trend of like making films with gratuitous sex scenes in it, just because it's like we're all 19, we're all grown up now, and we all just make movies. But like now, since leaving that, I think I've done maybe one sex scene. Like it's actually much rarer than it was back then, because I think we were trying to make a point. And you wanted to make, you know, the outrageous film that get the, you know, sex scene in there for no good reason.
And it was good because at the beginning of episode 1, there's a sex scene that's just sound.
Yes.
And clothes on the floor, and the camera panning across the clothes on the floor. I thought that worked quite well as well.
Yeah, it's actually it's more of that later on.
Why we've gone down this road of sex? I am going to get off this subject.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to climb off this subject.
Thank you.
Even if the bus is still moving, I'm getting off.
That makes two of us.
Yeah. One of the other things. I mean, these are things that in the acting world people find difficult. So I'm going to ask you some of the things that you might be asked to do, or you've probably already been asked to do.
Yeah.
And with how difficult you found them.
Yeah.
So has Elliot ever been asked to sing? And if he was, would he? You know, if they were going to remake La La Land, would you? Could you? Have you ever sung?
No.
Never. And you don't fancy?
No, honestly, no. My voice is this all the time. I actually, funny enough, last week I did karaoke at a party, and it was just the next day. Everyone was like, "Fucking hell, that was bad, wasn't it?" And I go, "Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?" And they go, "Not really. It's just bad." I've had to do. I had to do a little bit of singing for like a busking. I played a busker once in a film, and so but he was homeless, so it could just be like drony and shit. So it could be bad.
Do you think you could, if you had some lessons? Do you think you would or could?
I hold on to the belief.
Like a muscle memory type thing with the singing, or do you just think it's a dead duck for you?
I hold on to the belief that if I had enough money and enough time, I could do it. I mean, when I was at Mount View, we had some acting through song classes, and actually the teacher got me to like belt a note, and it didn't sound bad. It was like a good belted note, but I couldn't put that into a song when it came to it.
Yeah.
But I think with enough practice, that is there for everyone. I think it's just knowing how to use the tools that you have, or lack of tools, I suppose, in my case. So I think, sure, given enough time and money, I could do it, but At this point, it's pretty dead in the water, and I'm okay with that. I've come to terms with it.
If you could replace any actor in any film, what actor would you replace, and in what film, and why?
I immediately my mind goes to Jake Gyllenhaal. To be honest, anything that Jake Gyllenhaal's in, he's in so many good films. I love him so much. But the film that comes to mind is Prisoners. So the Denis Villeneuve film, Prisoners. It's one of my favorite films anyway, and I think there is so much in it. Like from an acting perspective, it is so impressive, and everyone does such a good job. And like, but also the way that the story moves, there is so much in it for all of the characters, and the stakes are so high all the time. And funny enough, I actually saw on Instagram, just by chance, I saw a scene from Prisoners, and it's a scene where he goes to that creepy guy's house, and he kind of says to him like, "Oh, hey man, do you do much shopping at the mall?" And he goes, "Oh, sometimes. Is it a crime?" And he's like, "No, it's just you bought kids' clothes." And you kind of just see what starts off as like you were at the mall, it suddenly becomes like
Quite heightened.
And watching the change in Jake Gyllenhaal there is incredible. It's such a good scene, and that scene is so intense because it's kind of like you feel the realization happening where he goes, "Well, you bought kids' clothes." And he's like, "Oh, must have been in a rush." And he's like, "Right, do you have children?" He's like, "No, I don't have children." And suddenly you see like Jake Gyllenhaal's face, and it's just the whole film is so good. And from an acting perspective, again, there's so much in there, and I think Jake Gyllenhaal's character specifically has such an enormous arc that is so well done that to even get close to doing something like that, or to have the opportunity to do something like that is we're talking dream realms, for that kind of thing.
So what do you do when you're not acting and not working? What kind of hobbies do you have? Hobbies, or is this your hobby?
It kind of is it's one of those ways, it kind of is my hobby, which is why I can kind of just do it all the time. But like I said before, I write quite a lot. I've been writing this pilot episode. We spoke briefly earlier. I've been writing a feature film for the last few years, which I've just completed. So we're kind of working on redrafts, and I'm talking to some producers about that. To be honest, it's one of these where I enjoy it enough for it to just be everything that I do, but I've tried to make a really conscious effort for it to not be everything I do, because I think even when you love what you do, you still need to strike a work-life balance, and I've not been very good at that, to be honest with you. Because if it was up to me, I'd do it all day and all night. I wouldn't stop. But actually, there is a lot of kind of merit and kind of strength mentally and physically in saying, okay, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to start my day at 9, I'm going to work until 6, and at 6 I'm going to shut my laptop, I'm going to go and have dinner, and I'm going to watch a film, and I'm going to wind down. And that's taken a really long time for me to kind of hone that mentality. I'm still kind of working on it, and it's gone to the point now where like creativity, in the sense of what we do, it's very often it's not full time. And so you often find that people have to fit things in around work. And so you get, Zoom read-throughs at 8 p.m. and you get rehearsals from 6 till 9. And it's just like, I was doing that a little too much. But otherwise, I like to, I like to go on walks and be a bit, because obviously I've lived in the city for quite a while now, so I enjoy kind of when me and my partner or me and my mates just kind of go for like a walk in the countryside and just get a bit of fresh air in the lungs and go into the mountains and disappear for a week and just, do that kind of thing. So I love doing that and kind of just resetting the mind a little bit. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
It's been good fun.
We've talked and talked and talked, and I think that's probably the end.
I think so. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Good to be back.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.